Yeah, it's not.
It is.
Oh, okay. Oh, so if I set up in your own. Yeah, I will not. That's what I was saying. So, all in the basis, but process.
That's the most difficult to as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got a structure around that.
And you can also just get from secondary room. Yes. If you don't understand the QR code on the screen, it's basically the registration form. It's just wait, registration goes to the department, right? And this is but yes, so it's we will.
If you look over the months, there's nothing else in there.
For now. Oh,
I think that, I didn't know about it.
We're just doing the QR code form in the room. If you've just joined us online, if you don't mind scanning the QR code on the computer in front of you, I'll put a link in the chat as well. Just a bit of information about yourself, your company, so we can personalise follow-up support to you and your business. And it also goes off to the Department of Trade, just that they know who we're helping, and we can continue to do workshops like this for free. I'll just give everyone a couple of minutes just to do that, and then we will look to start. This morning we'll be doing our workshop with the lovely Aidan. We will look to sort of finish that sort of around just before 11, and then we'll go into a Q&A session. So if you've got questions in the room, don't mind holding them if possible. Online, you can put them into the Q&A function just whenever you want, basically, and then we'll go on to Q&A at the end. And then we'll say goodbye to online participants and people in the room who can have some time to network as well after. Actually, we're going to come and just do that. I have a Wi-Fi password just on the table. Anyone wants to use the Wi-Fi. Keep that and put it on Wi-Fi. It's undone.
It's like doing an exam.
Something went to school, otherwise.
No, absolutely.
I was just saying, it's interesting in the business sector, there's no manufacturing.
Was it a manufacturer?
No, there's innovation, I suppose. I just put in manufacturing, but yeah, it's like, didn't think, oh, that's interesting. Yes.
I must have missed that one. So I made it at full tonight.
I'm always happy, yes, definitely. This is it's not well, for you, but it might help with
Right, let's start then. Good morning, everyone. This is a hybrid event, so we've got everyone in the room and we've also got people online today. Welcome to our growth event this morning. My name is Sarah Winsbone. I work with Ambitious Essex, and we deliver the Growth Hub and also the Enhanced Mentoring Schemes to Ambitious Essex across the county. So just to let you know a bit about the Ambitious Essex, we are basically a one-stop shop for any business needs you have. So if you're looking, the Growth Hub will do things like helping you get access to grants, to funding. We have business advisors who can help you with support. Anything you don't know, we can signpost you to sort of other services that will be able to help you. We also have our enhanced mentoring program, which is free one-to-one support, personalised with a industry expert mentor. So we've got both sort of elements of our support. So basically anything you need business support wise, we can sort of help with stuff. All of our services are free as well. So please get in contact with us, or we'll get in contact with you after today with the details provided, and basically help the business to grow. Yeah, welcome to today. I am recording the presentation, the workshop to our YouTube. So I'll send you out a link this afternoon or tomorrow, the link to our website, our YouTube, sorry, where you can access it all. So if you don't feel like you've got to scribble down loads of notes and stuff, obviously do if you want to, but it will all be available with the presentation, sorry, where's it? On YouTube for you to look back at whatever time you like. So it's all on there. Thank you for doing the questionnaire, the summary form. Basically today we'll sort of do our presentation and then we'll go to Q&A. People online just put them into the Q&A section, and then ask them whether you can see just ask the questions, and then we'll do some networking after, looked to sort of wrap things up around midday. Teas and coffees at the back itself, but it's just outside the room. So, that's everything from me. I'll pass over to Aidan, who is our expert speaker for today in things growth. So I'll pass over to him and thank you.
Thank you very much. Morning, everybody. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. I know that the weather is not completely sunny, and had we done this on Friday, you know, it would have been an easier journey in. But the fact that you're here is great. What I would like to talk about today is something that business owners often want to do, but quite often find quite difficult to do, and that is stepping back to look at their business, what they're doing and how they're doing it, in order to grow, in order to scale up. So today really is an opportunity to look at what is potentially going to help those that are doing well, drive the growth that they want to do, and for those that are looking to unlock certain challenges that they may have within their organisations and their businesses, to fix some of those things. What I'd like to really talk through is the journey. So any business of any size, whether that be starting up, whether that be scaling up, or whether you're a more mature organisation, will go on a journey. And that journey is all about the ambition that you have at whatever stage you're in, and then delivering that, the execution of that journey. And within that, there's often opportunity for business owners, founders, or leadership teams to potentially lose a bit of momentum. And that's really what we're going to look at today. The interesting thing, and the part that I'll start with really, is that despite everything that's going on in the world today, there's actually a lot of ambition out there. What the data shows us, though, is that delivering sustained growth, sustained traction after that ambition is the difficult bit. So that's the bit that we're going to look at. What I want to focus on really is not a whole bunch of abstract theory. It's to bring what is a very practical lens to a very real problem across a lot of organisations today. So that's the focus for us. To start though, what I really want to look through is the core premise of what I'd like to talk through. And that is that there are a whole range of organisations that are sat in this room, that are online, and thank you for those that are taking the time to join online as well, that have got a lot of ambition out there. And the data, as I said, shows that ambition does remain widespread. Turning into that sustained traction is the harder part. There's two areas where I suggest that really comes into sharp focus and sharp relief. That is when things are going well, and there can be an assumption that if you simply do more of the same, that will instantly result in greater levels of growth. And in some cases, that absolutely is the case. And that's what a lot of companies have had great success in doing, in just scaling up what they're doing. But it's not always the case. The second side of that equation is when organisations and companies find themselves in some challenging times, and there can be a reaction to that that's based upon assumption or a knee-jerk reaction from founder or leadership team as to what the root cause really is. And what I'm going to talk through is that in many cases, the answer isn't always to do more. It's not always to do more meetings, come up with more ideas, looking at different things that are going to fix the problem. It's really to understand, first of all, whether the business is fundamentally in the best possible place to translate the effort that it's got, so the capacity, the capability, the skills, the competitive position that it's crafted and carved out for itself in the marketplace, into growth. And understanding that is what we'll talk about as we go into today. So growth traction is a lot about really whether you're converting what you're doing into the correct set of actions to realise and optimise what you're actually seeking to achieve at a business level, at the top and bottom line. So, why does all of this matter now? Well, I think it will be very clear to everybody here and everybody online as to why this matters now. And that is that growth is really, really difficult at the moment. And that is quite something to say when we've come out of all of the uncertainty that Brexit presented and the fact that people were kind of sat on their hands for quite a while waiting to see what the fallout of that was, then straight into a global pandemic. And now we've got what we've got. And so there are two sets of factors at play here. We've got the things on the right, which are all about the external factors. So we know that demand in certain places is weaker, consumer confidence is suppressed. It's all a bit difficult from people and affordability in a lot of cases. Costs are on the up right across the piece. Inflation is really hitting. We've got in certain sectors people constraints where there's a real genuine skill shortage, and that makes things very difficult, even if you have the ambition. Finance for particular sectors is incredibly difficult to access, and it is forcing some certain sectors to go and look abroad to access the finance they need to expand. And then we've got all of the geopolitical shocks and instability that goes through everything that's going on at the minute. That's not looking at what goes on day to day in your own businesses. So when we look at that, we've then got a position where leaders have always got competing factors, where attention is under pressure. Capacity is a challenge, and it doesn't matter how big your organisation is. I imagine in the room we've got folk that are running businesses on their own, but you could be a large multinational. It doesn't matter. There will always be a capacity limit to what you can physically do. Those two then compete with the third point, which is that because of everything on the right here, and because of the internal pressures of running business, the business as usual, any decisions that are being made become all that more difficult because the stakes have gone up. You've got to make the right decision in doing what you need to do. And then, of course, the last key to all of this is that momentum is often very easy to lose, but not so easy to gain. So why is this whole journey so important? Well, it's because the world has become all that more complex and more difficult to navigate. So really taking that time to step back, to hold a mirror up and actually find the time to look at how could things be done to either improve what you're already doing well or fix those things that have been niggling away for a while is pretty key. Just before we get into some of the data to support this view that I have, a bit about me. My background is really all about commercial and operations. I have seen many of these growth issues from inside leadership teams and across some quite complex commercial environments as well. So believe me, they operate at all levels and at all business sizes. The one thing that I'm absolutely resolute on, though, is that in the vast majority of cases, growth issues do not stem from any one particular issue. They cut across a whole swathe of different things. Priorities, leadership, the challenges that you're setting to the team if you employ staff, and the way in which you're going about monitoring and managing the progress that you've got. So today is really talking about much of that and putting that into some level of context. Before we get on to the whole kind of basis of how to practically look at this, let's look at the background to it. What this is data taken from a government source. So the Department of Business and Trade annually canvassed the views of about 10,000 SMEs. So folk like exactly the people in this room. And they asked the people that are running those businesses views on various things. And what that's showing is that despite all of the things that I've just gone through, the challenges that exist both externally and internally, actually, the majority of business owners still want to focus on growth. They haven't accepted the status quo. They're not prepared to sit on their hands and wait for things to become good, write things out. There's still an active approach to growth, which is really encouraging, because if you look at the news, you could take the view that everything is absolutely on the way down. I don't think it is quite as simple as that. Importantly, the areas that are being invested in are workforce skills, fantastic. New working practices, as you can imagine, AI is taking quite a big focus in this particular area. And one that is the lowest on here, but potentially the most important, are leadership skills. Now, for those that kind of look at this, the UK has a productivity gap between us, our European counterparts, and wider globally as well. So actually investing in management capability, making decisions, and everything that goes with that is vitally important and will help overall this whole growth position. So it's pretty key. Now, that's the good bit. Where it becomes difficult, I come back to this point around journey. And the journey, taking exactly the same data sets, this is exactly the same 10,000 SMEs that the government canvassed, and by the way, I should say, this is the latest set of data. It was published in September of last year, so it's as accurate as it can be based upon completely kind of impartial views of what's out there. It's an annual thing. And what this is showing is that growth and ambition around growth and then delivering it are simply not one and the same thing. Because taking that 10,000, those 10,000 organisations and looking across a 4-year growth period, fewer than 15% actually achieved sustained growth year on year for 4 years solid, which is a really, really, stating the obvious, low number. When you look at the position of organisations that grew from the year before, it's better, so more than half did grow. And then when we look at those that were anticipating employment growth, again, it's less than half. So what we can see is that we've got quite a complex picture. We've got folk that are highly ambitious for their business, prepared to invest, but delivering it is where the real challenge lies, and making sure that that growth can be done in a position where there are external challenges is the important part. So, the exam question then for me is, where does growth, or where can growth start to lose traction? Well, we've seen already from the data that it's usually not because ambition is missing. You know, if anything, that's the really positive part, that people do want the best for what they are setting out to do. But we do, more often than not, see this sort of thing within the growth of the company. It can start off really well, it then can get to a point where it's starting to plateau and in some cases decline. But what I'd say is that it's not always a case of external conditions affecting this. And an example that I'd give is that of a company that we're all going to be familiar with, which is Next. So exactly the same 4-year period that we're talking about, where 15% of SMEs were growing year on year, Next managed to do the reverse of that. So they operate obviously in the retail sector in a time period that was massively strained. So retail and the emergence of internet, get the right words out, things like Shein, external suppliers are bringing in very, very cheap goods into the UK that are making it a real choice for consumers as to whether they put their discretionary spend into an established retailer at a higher cost or a lower cost alternative. In each of those 4 years, they took their revenue and profit up. So it can't always be a case that everything going on externally is always going to impact what happens internally within your business. There are factors at play as to what the business owners and founders themselves need to consider. And that really brings me to this point here, and that is that growth can have the handbrake put on, in some cases, ever so slightly, but in other cases, not quite so, because the business is not fully set up in some cases to deliver growth consistently. And that's really what today is all about. So what I'd like to talk to and introduce really is a really practical approach that gives folk here an opportunity to sort of hold that mirror up against their organisation. Now, if we were sat down talking about how you start business and all the things that you should do and think about and traditional way of thinking, it would be this: looking at business effectiveness. And you'd ask yourself the question, have we got the right direction in play? Do we know what our business plan is and the strategy around that, how we're going to roll it out and all the great things that we're going to do? Tick, we have. Do we know how we're going to access and win the customers that we need to win against? The competition, what's the ideal customer profile that we've got? All of those things that are going to make up how you actually start to grow the business. From an operational perspective, do we have, whether we're selling a product or a service, an operational model that is profitable, can deliver a quality service that's going to give us the things that we want to do, that's repeatable? Tick. From a people and leadership perspective, if you're employing people, have we got the right skills and capability to go on to do whatever it is that we need to do? From a commercial perspective, have we got the right P&L? Is it good quality revenue? Is it profitable? Can we use that as a basis to invest and make the business whatever it is we're setting out to do? And lastly, have we got people on the hook? Now, this is all absolutely, at the centre of many folks thinking, and it is in a lot of management practice, right? So that's all good stuff. But the reality is that everyone here has probably got a business that's off and running and done this many months ago, many years ago. So how do you take a look now to say that if we've got a business and we're doing well, how do we ensure we're doing as well as we can do? And if it's not quite doing as well as it could be, how do we hold that mirror up and work out which bits are the areas that we need to look at? So what I've got here really is an area where this is where issues sit. And what I'd like to introduce is the Mohala Growth Traction Framework, which is more a question of why. It's why growth can lose traction and identifying areas where founders and leaders can look at their business and say, actually, there are a few things there that if we could tighten up on, that would give us a bit of an advantage. And they break down into 5 areas. So we've got priorities, decisions, accountability, capacity, and alignment. And so this is the framework that I'd like to talk through. This is part of the wider cohesive growth approach that we have, which is more comprehensive. But what this does is provide anyone a really simple way of looking at growth in the context of why you might see certain things happening, or being able to assess yourselves in a way that can deliver whatever aspirations you have. And it breaks down into the areas that I spoke about. So from a priorities perspective, are we really clear on what matters most? Do we know the things that are going to deliver us the biggest, if you like, bang for buck? Linked to that then are decisions. Are the decisions that you're making being made consistently and effectively? Can often be the case that actually decisions are kind of made, but they're kind of not, and they kind of roll over and become a bit of a challenge over time. Capacity. Do we have enough headroom in the business that we want to do? We can often think we can do everything, and actually you can't, right? You're trying to run around the supermarket and also think about your business and work out what the next step is, and then you forget the milk, right? That's what happens, and headroom is important. Accountability. There is a massive difference between somebody saying, yeah, I've done it, and they've ticked an item on a list, and fundamentally owning an outcome within your business. If you're a founder or a leader, funnily enough, all of that comes back to you to fix the problem. So accountability and ownership is a real area to look at. And then one that I'm very, very focused on is alignment. And that really is, if you're employing folk, are you really clear? Everybody is pulling in the same direction. In other words, do they see your point of view? Are they backing you and supporting you and helping you deliver that? What I'll do now is to go on to explain a little bit more about what I mean in each of these areas. So when we talk about priorities, there's a whole piece around, are we clear on what matters most? The starting point to that is to take a really good hard look, list the things down, write them on a piece of paper and say, have we got too many initiatives in whatever guise, or things that you're doing just to keep the business floating, alive, to dilute the effort that we need to deliver growth, right? If you have, then that's a great thing. You've got ideas, you're doing stuff, but you've also then got consciousness that you've got too many things on the table at any one time. Second part to look at then is whether you've got the right set of goals. Goals can often be very, very broad and too broad, quite frankly. We want to grow. Brilliant. And that's it. Right? You've got to have then clarity. If we want to grow by this much in these areas, with these people being able to do what we're asking them to do in order to get to that point. So goals is an important part because it then links into the third part, which if you're in the supermarket and you've forgotten the milk, what is it that you're not going to do that's going to enable you next time to ensure that you don't forget the milk? So trade-offs and the things that you stop doing to enable you to grow are as important as the things that you do need to focus on in order to grow. And in the case of Next, that was exactly what they were focusing on as well. They were working on exactly what they didn't want to do to enable them to grow. And to put it into some level of context, their growth went from something like 4.8 billion, so we're in the billions here, it's not insignificant, to 6.2 billion in that 4-year period. Massive growth in a very, very difficult time period. All of those three things then relate to focus, and really asking whether the teams are busy and that they can create the right level of momentum in the areas that you need to grow alongside your business as usual. And that's pretty difficult in some cases, but it's important. So the starting point is all about, have we got a hit list that we think is correct for what we're trying to do now? And there may be some things that you need to address in order to get to that growth agenda that you need to get to. Second point then are decisions, and probably most people will resonate with that, where you've got 1,000,001 things to do, all of them is all of them is decision, all of them is decision, and you've got to get to a point of answering all of them. And in smaller organisations, it becomes all that more difficult because you've got thousands of hats on. People are all asking you the question, and it all becomes quite difficult. The things to look out for, so this is the practical lens again, things to look out for in decisions and whether you're, effective in that process, is whether things are continually getting revisited. Do the same bits and pieces kind of re-emerge time in and time again. A couple of areas to look out for that is if you're in a service sector of some sort or the other, service delivery issues. If they keep bubbling up to the surface that you've got this thing that keeps happening, you've got a chain of events that has the potential to sort of ride out. So service delivery can have an impact on your reputation in the marketplace. It can then have an impact on the people that are going to ultimately be on the hook to fix it, not least of which will be the founder or leaders that are within that business. And of course, those two then have the impact of making it more difficult for you to sell whatever it is you're selling. So making the right decision around addressing things is pretty key. And another one is around morale, actually, as well. Not addressing morale within a team can have that handbrake effect of just everything becoming a little bit more slow and difficult, preventing the leaders getting to where they want to get to, and that frustrates them, and it all becomes a bit more challenging. Decisions don't necessarily translate into action. The third point I'd like to talk about is criteria or choices. Now, on more than one occasion, I've seen in businesses a pet project of one of the directors or leaders becoming the thing that's the focus of the business. The reality is if you put down some really clear criteria of, is this the right thing that we should be doing at a very top level? Is it going to be profitable? Can we compete in the market? All of the things that you naturally kind of ask yourself. The answer probably would be no, but guess what? That's what happened because there aren't clear criteria based upon the decisions that are being made. So having clarity and timeliness around the decisions that you're making and being robust around the decisions you're making is important. As I say, all of that then works to become either a handbrake or the ability to take the brake off in doing what you want to do. The decisions is the second part. Third part, I saw some nodding heads around accountability, and it is a really, really key factor. So, part of this is that you've got to give clearly autonomy to the people that you've got within the business if you're employing people. That's understood. But once that autonomy is given, there has to be that transactional relationship where everyone knows what is expected of them. So responsibility is the first part of that. In some cases, it's kind of assumed, it's not necessarily defined. In some cases, it's completely unwritten. And that means that there could be a difference between what the founders or leaders are expecting and the people that are being asked to do. And of course, that then brings you back into the loop of you having to fix the problem on one of those post-it notes on the board from earlier on. Second part is ownership. I mentioned earlier on, ownership really isn't just ticking a box. It's fundamentally fixing a problem. So if you've got a sales team and you're saying to them, look, you're making it quite difficult for us to invest in this business because the forecasting is up and down, it's not accurate, it's all over the place. I'd like you to fix this problem. And there's a little bit of lip service being paid to that. That's not ownership. That's not accountability. So being clear with people that, if they've got that responsibility, the answer is delivering the outcome, not the input and just ticking a box is important. Delivering it is key, looking for those elements of traction along the way. And of course, then reviewing it, making sure that you've got the momentum behind it by having a cadence of we're going to review this and all get on the same bus in terms of making sure it all happens. And of course, providing support as a leadership where support is required. Fourth part, pretty key this one, and often actually overlooked, and that is, do we have enough room just simply to do what we want to do? The first part is to say, as a business, have we crafted out enough growth time for the owners or the leaders to be able to think about this? Because it's going to impact everybody in terms of what we want to do. But then linked to that, at an individual level, is the business encouraging those that are accountable for that to have enough personal bandwidth? And, one technique is to say, use a Friday morning or a Friday afternoon, some dedicated time to be able to think about the challenge of growth. Because without that, business as usual creeps in, all the problems, all the politics, everything gets in the way, and it doesn't get done. The third part is once the folk that run the business have been successful in determining their priorities, they've got their decision making done, they know who is on the hook, and they've got some time to have thought through all of that. It's recognising that delivering change, no matter whether you are an owner manager of a business or you're running a much larger organisation that's got people employed, is really difficult and it's got to be done right. So communication of the change early, getting people on board, making sure they understand what change is all about, giving them the opportunity to ask the questions that need answering to assure them of what they are looking to understand. And really looking at that often use piece, in fact, Dan and I were talking about this earlier on, of people, process and technology. The people bit is always the most difficult part. And it's the bit that if you've got everything else above it right, can actually make things not work quite as well as you hoped. So delivering change is important. There is also the flip to that, where there's too much change, the change fatigue comes in, where you just got stuff going on constantly, everyone's going, "Ooh," you know. But change is really important. And then last of all is to ask the question of the business, with what we've got going on, running the day-to-day business, have we got fundamentally enough slack in our organisation to take up, if we're really successful, what this growth will deliver? If you have, and if you're running at 50% of what you could do, happy days. But if you haven't, you've got an opportunity to think through, what does that actually mean? Do I need at some point to say, right, well, I've hit that barrier, I now need to start making some investment in other people capacity and skills. And that brings us to the last part, which is alignment. This, out of all of them, is the one that I've seen really unhook any and all good work that's been done before it. And it's really, really overlooked in some very large organisations. But it doesn't matter how big the company is, this is exactly the same no matter what. And that is that you need to ensure that everybody is pulling in the same direction. So it starts with the leadership of the business. There's often an assumption, an implied assumption, that everybody understands what's going on in the heads of the people that run the business. And the reality is that's often not the case. In some cases, it's because it's not communicated effectively. In other cases, when it is communicated, it might not be done as well as it could be. But there is a whole piece of it of ensuring that people really do understand the journey that you would like them to go on, and that they're going to support you in that journey. And if they're not, then there's a question of whether they're in the right place as well. For those that have got teams, unconnected objectives is a huge area to look at. You could be sat in meetings where everybody is getting on incredibly well, but you're not gaining the traction that you want. And part of it can be that you are really looking at things in perhaps a way that's not going to support that growth. If you look at the way a business should drive growth, there is what I call revenue engine, which is, if you like, a relay race between the people that are creating whatever it is that you're selling, product or service, those that are marketing it, whether that's internal or external, and those that are selling it. And there's a baton that's handed from one to the other, and each should reinforce the other. Doesn't always happen like that. And so you can get a very common example where marketing, to the best of their intent, are creating leads, but they're absolutely useless for the salespeople because they're the wrong type of leads. It's a really, really common one, and one that happens, you would be surprised, a lot across many companies. So ensuring that the objectives that sit across those functions works effectively is one way of ensuring that you've got alignment within the business. Second to that, though, are incentives. If you've got teams that are on the hook to deliver certain things and you are putting bonuses in play for them, watch out for the bonuses that you're using. So if you've got a delivery team that's on the hook for a certain level of margin, make sure that they're not influencing adversely what the salespeople are trying to do, because they know the market conditions, and these are bumping up the margin to become uncompetitive. Again, quite a common thing. All of that has the impact potentially of leading to siloed working, and that's the biggest area here, where you've got people that really are paying lip service, they're empire building, they're only interested in their own kind of area, and you've got a structure and an incentive mechanism that's reinforcing that. So alignment, not spoken about very often, but absolutely critical, because you can do, as I said before, everything else really, really well, but that can kind of unstitch a lot of this. So they're the 5 areas. Hopefully that's given a bit of a sort of background as to some of the things that you might think about. the real question I'd ask now is, you know, for everyone here, have a think about where could your biggest growth risk be? From a priorities perspective, are they achievable? Are they clear, but are they achievable? From a decision-making perspective, are they timely and consistent? Accountability, is it really owned? Does everyone know what they're on the hook to do? Have we got the ability, the capacity to deliver everything that we expect over the coming years? And last of all, is everyone pulling in the same direction? In their own right, none of these are difficult questions, but you know, you can sit down over a glass of wine or something stronger and think through some of the implications, because you know, they do reveal some areas where, you know, if you do some tweaking or in some cases some major surgery, it does give you a better opportunity to address growth, either accelerate it or fix some problems. That's that part of it. So what I would then, so last couple of slides really leave you with are 3 really practical actions, okay? The first thing is to simplify. Really make things as straightforward as you can do in terms of looking at growth. Narrow the number of active things that you think are going to drive that growth so that you know that you've got that momentum working and that you've ironed out as many of the aspects that could come to bite you in advance. And then decide what matters most. You know, there are going to be an important part of this is deciding what you're not going to do, but the things that matter most are the ones you want to focus on. Clarify ownership. If you employ people, or even if it's just you, work out how you're going to do this and what you are going to be asking people to do and be explicit about it. Review the progress that you're going to go on in terms of that journey. And especially importantly if it's just yourself, because you know, often you can kind of convince yourself, well, I'll just park that until next week, and of course next week never comes. And then last of all is protect time. There's a great dilution effect of trying to do everything and, you know, really ensuring that you've got the time to think it through or just spend a bit of time away from the business to think about the business. So the in and on the business thing is important. So those 3 practical actions, if nothing else, have a think about those. And then last of all, it really comes back to the very start of where I started this discussion really. Ambition is there and it absolutely matters. But what I would suggest is that delivering it well matters more than the ambition, because that gives you the opportunity to either speed up or inadvertently put the brake on. And so using this as a really straightforward, simple way of looking at what you're doing can really help in driving whatever it is that you're trying to do. And that's pretty much it. If this has raised any useful questions for your own business and you want to look at growth, from an impartial perspective, whether that be how you're doing growth, sales, how you're selling, how you're addressing the market, we're very happy for a conversation. The QR code there, if you would like to follow this up and book a meeting. But that's it. Well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aidan. If anyone has any questions for Aidan, what I will go to live. What's up?
About, so my expertise is really in the people bit, so number 5 of your step. What are the most common people issues that you come across as you have done the work you have with various companies, like the things that just keep coming up all the time?
Communication is a massive part. There genuinely is quite often an assumption that, you know, we're setting out on a journey. That may be communicated at the start. In some cases it's not, and that's even worse, but communication really is a challenge. asking people to step up into roles that they're not fully supported on is another area. You know, it's okay asking people to step up, but don't ask them to take the impossible on or give them the poison chalice. You know, they're important things too. But there are a whole range of people-related things that are going to affect growth. In the sales area, not providing people the right level of training is an area that keeps coming up as well. So you can have great growth ambition. You may have communicated the direction of travel, the journey that you want to go on. But if you haven't got the right fundamental skills, it could be that you've got quite a complex product, for example, you know. In that scenario, there is often a tendency just to revert back to telling people everything the thing can do. Well, we're in an era now where people can find out absolutely everything they want on what your company does because of the internet. And that's been the case now for many, many years. So the role of people that are selling has fundamentally changed into helping people understand how they address whatever outcome it is they want to achieve. You know, they want to fix the problem by investing in whatever it is you might be selling. The way people sell hasn't necessarily kept pace with that, and companies haven't invested in helping those that they've got working for them to adopt that change. And it is a very different tack. So the people part is very critical, really. There's a whole load of other things we can talk about, but there's some of them that I do see regularly. Okay, yeah, sure.
Had a bit of mine, Aidan.
Yeah.
You were talking about the 4-year period.
Yeah.
They've asked whether they recommend using a 4-year period, even for smaller companies, or looking at more short term and then the 4-year in what time as well.
Business planning wise, normally it's between 3 and 5 years.
Yeah.
So you want a period that you can measure that's kind of reasonable. Larger companies will do a 5-year plan. For smaller businesses, and it depends very much on where you are and what you're doing. But a 3-year plan can be quite useful. It's entirely up to you, but don't make it so long that it becomes unrealistic. Look, you know, a lot can happen in 4 years, as we've seen. So be realistic about it and monitor it, I think, is the important part. You know, if you can start to look at things objectively, then you get to a place where you can really track how you're progressing and start to adjust, because you will have to adjust on that journey as well.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was really, thank you for that. So really good, really good. I think one thing you say about what issues just keep coming up. And I think myself, both as I'm doing freelance work, you know, having my finger in many different pies. And one thing that always comes up is this idea of an hourly rate of how much I sort of charge my time out for, and that can so easily get swamped because you're doing development to work, as you say, that thing about, you know, sectioning out time. So what is reasonable for development and what becomes having to be quite firm with people. And I do find that, yeah, it's the soft negotiations which then take time, but then turning that into hard cash. And so some of that element of pricing, well, both the sort of myself as the product of the business, but also the actual products that I sell or services. And the other thing I put in there is that, yeah, for all many different reasons, this idea that sometimes, as you say, it is hard, and we end up going into survival mode. And in survival mode, that is where, yeah, things get tough.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's difficult when you're in that position. And it's not always you know, comfortable or easy to kind of take yourself away from that. You know, this is never going to be the answer to all scenarios. This is a framework to help people look at what they're doing. But if you are in that position of, you know, needing to really fix a problem, it can give you some good clues as to where you start to look within the business that you're running. You know, if you fundamentally got a problem with delivery, then you've got to look at delivery as an issue. If you fundamentally got a problem where you've lost confidence in salespeople that you've got, then guess what? You've got to go start recruiting and looking for the right salespeople to do their job. But at least it gives you a mechanism to say, I know that I need to look at delivery. I know that I need to look at sales.
Yeah, I very much put down capacity approaches and alignment.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I found out. It was about, actually who really understands what I'm doing and can communicate that. And I can trust to be on board going forward, because it is very much I now know I do need to bring more people in.
Yeah.
But it's the alignment.
Yeah, there's a real power to having the right people on the bus. There's a very common situation where you end up, rightly or wrongly, and all businesses have got this to some degree, where you have folk that are just not in it. They're there in person, but they really don't care. I've been in meetings where the whole business has been together, and that there are going to be a few terrorists that are only there for the paycheck, right? They're not necessarily the sort of people that you want within your business unless there is a deliberate reason to have them there. But for those that are growing, it's especially important to ensure that you've got the right people on the bus, and they'll bring different skills. If you're in people, you'll know that that bring the skill set, the different skill sets that people bring are important. So you've got pragmatists and you've got visionaries and you've got all the people that are going to deliver. They're the sort of people that actively think about having the bus.
And it's cheap. It's much cheaper to get people on the bus who are really company already than turnover.
Absolutely.
You don't want to turn over because it's expensive to do that. So the skill set to align people you've already got, get the best out of them, is that is a real skill that I don't think many leaders actually.
No, I agree. Yeah. I agree. And in some cases, it is possible to turn people that have been or can be perceived as not the right people around, because it's a recognition of why they are in the position that they're in, and that's often because they're not supported.
Yeah.
They're not given the right level of support from the business or their immediate management they need. And if you do that and invest in them, and I'm not saying this is right for everybody, but for some, then it can turn them around into being really, really good employees. I don't know whether that your experience of
I think that's absolutely right. I think that people, I look at it, and the stuff I do is really about that elephant in the room. There's usually an elephant, you've got to find out what it is, acknowledge it, do the work. But 8 times out of 10 people get to a good result, and 20% of the time you've got to go, actually we need a different kind of exit for that. But I would always say, look at what you've got and the skill set you've got, and build on that and try to improve that, and then think about what teams need changing, what support. Quite often it's quite a simple conversation. I think we just don't know how to have.
Well, it's that leadership piece again.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily recognizing as a manager, because a lot of managers have just kind of fallen into their roles. They aren't themselves given the management training of recognizing what motivates their team, what their team needs, how they are then being asked to deliver things. Everything's a little bit fluid, and some of this focus can help that journey.
One question of mine. Is it better? So they own a florist in Braintree.
Okay.
They've asked, is it better to grow their revenue, their profit, or their customer loyalty? Which sort of avenue would you prioritize first? Does that go back to the
profitability is important, right? If you haven't got profit, you haven't got a business. So if you grow revenue and you've got no profit, you've still got a problem. So being clear on how you make money is really important. If you've then got to take these in order, I suppose, then look at your customer loyalty. The type and mix of customer is important as well. You want customers that are going to help you get to wherever it is you want to get to. So some customers can be great in the fact that they're high volume, but A, they can be problematic, and B, they can represent very, very low profit. And therefore they take up a disproportionate amount of your time. So really recognising what good quality clients are, how to access them, how to make them profitable, all of that will impact your revenue anyway. It just will. But have a look at your outbound pricing too. Often it's a difficult thing when people are looking at their pricing and there is a, in some cases, understandable reluctance. But you know, the world is the world, right? You've got to do what is required. There may be other things that you can do to grow, but creating that quality commercial model, which was one of the things I spoke about in that business effectiveness part, the traditional thinking of looking at business, is key. Yeah.
Right, I will just put up on the screen, there's another lovely QR code for you with a feedback form from this morning. So literally, I think I've got about 7 questions on there. If you don't mind just filling it out, just like how you found this morning, if that's useful, what we can deliver as a growth hub again in the future. So there's certain topics you want us to help you with, or certain support you'd like in the future, put them in there, and I will endeavour to cover as many topics as possible over the year. So just to say thank you so much, Miss Aidan, for this morning. I have come away with so many ideas and just sort of taking that step back, like workshop title, just to step back to reflect and think, these are the things. Oh yeah, the accountability, that's what's stumped my growth, or the priorities, and just to have that outsider fresh set of eyes basically in the business. I found that really useful, so I hope that resonates with everyone else in mine and in the room as well. So thank you so much for your time. I also want to say thank you to Tabby and Digital Forum for hosting us this morning. It is a lovely space here, and they do lots and lots here. They've got their hot desking, their work spaces and everything, so beautiful venues. Thank you to them for hosting us today. And just bring your attention, we have a couple of upcoming workshops. We've got one on the 11th of June in Chelmsford, which is also online as well, called Master Your Finances. So we're partnering with Metro Bank and the FSB on that. So that would be really good just to look at your finances. That's a 2-part sort of looking at, we've got a speaker called Tony who's going to be doing sort of the basics of finances, cash forecasting, everything like that. And then we've got a speaker called Kelsey, who's doing sort of looking at automation, how you can use automation to improve your finance, make it more effective and streamline basically. So that's a really, really good one in Patch in Chelmsford on the 11th of June, or online if you're this way and don't want to do the drive down there. And we also, I don't know if it's relevant to some people, we've got a startup course. So if you are in the early stages of your business, or you know someone who's thinking about starting a business, we have a 2-day course on the 13th and 14th of July. I will send you these details as well. It's a 2-day course, online only, so you can do it in your pajamas in your home if you like. All about sort of the fundamentals of business, sort of doing your marketing, your finance, your everything to do with starting your own business. So that's a really, really good introduction as well. Course, it's 2 days. But yes, those are what we've got upcoming. I will email you all the details about everything, and if you don't mind just doing a bit of feedback. I will also put I think everyone did the sign up form that thank you so much everyone. Online people, we're going to have to say goodbye to you unfortunately, and then we can network, see and just chat it more frequently. Thank you so much everyone. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.